I rented the mirror across from her dance class. The trouble started with a pear magnet and a postcard. On our fridge, Thursdays wore the same small note all spring. Dance back by 9. Nora would tap the pear magnet like a starter pistol, kiss my cheek and leave in leggings, hair knotted high. I liked that she had a place where no one asked her to explain herself. After the winter we'd had, my mother's stroke, 2 rounds of layoffs at my office, any room that made her straighter on return seemed holy. Then, rummaging in her gym bag for chapstick, I found a glossy postcard, floor work intensive, advanced, Thursdays 9:11 p.m. same warehouse arts center. Same hallway, different studio. Same night, different end time. I bent the corner and unbent it as if I could fix anything that way. I'm a city planner by trade. When I'm anxious, I draw maps. I sketch the arts center on a yellow pad. Studios A.D., the squeaky exit, the vending machine that keeps quarters like secrets. Across from Studio B, the advanced class. The center rents a photo studio by the hour. The website showed couples in good lighting and a ficus doing its best. I booked it for a Thursday, 9 to 10:30. Late zoning meeting, I told Nora. Somebody's mad at a tree. She smiled. There's always a tree. At 9 the hallway thinned to echoes. I cracked my door and watched through the square of glass. Inside Studio B, 8 dancers worked with a visiting choreographer I recognized from the postcard. Aris, compact, fluid, the kind of man whose shirts look like compliments. Music thudded. The room obeyed. When he corrected Nora's line, he stood close, palms hovering a breath from her ribs, then resting there briefly as if to persuade the shape into being. It was textbook. It was nothing. It was something. I didn't film. I watched. At 9:37 they broke for water. She laughed at something he said, a bright, surprised laugh I hadn't heard in months, and looked at him the way a person looks at an idea that might name a feeling they didn't know they were having. I closed my door and stared at the ficus as if it could advise me. It, too, seemed thirsty. The next Thursday I brought a folding chair. Beginner class spilled into the hall at 9, ponytails and chatter. Nora didn't appear with them. At 9:52 she came out of Studio B glowing, sweat, effort, discovery. Aris leaned in the doorway with casual dignity. He touched her shoulder. She didn't flinch. He looked like a man who knew exactly where the rules were and exactly how to stand near their edge. That night at home I asked, "How was class?" "Turns," she said. "Humbling, I was charmingly bad." She kissed the top of my head and went to the shower. I could have asked right then. Instead, I said, "You smell like dust and oranges," which is not a question and not an answer. We slept like people auditioning for honesty and picking different scenes. I went a third Thursday because I needed a place to put whatever I was feeling. Aris had them on the floor. Roll, sweep, fold, rise up on the count, down on the breath. When Nora missed a cue, he stepped in behind her and guided her through, both forearms bracketing her waist for a heartbeat too long for my comfort and too brief for a scandal. She closed her eyes to memorize the path. He didn't. I folded my chair and waited by the buzzing vending machine. When Nora rounded the corner and saw me, delight crossed her face, then concern, the way sunlight crosses a room before the curtain is pulled. "Eli," she said, "what are you?" "Zoning ended early," I said. "Thought I'd pick you up." I nodded toward Studio B. "Introduce me." Aris arrived with easy politeness. "Hey," he said, hand out. "Aris." "This is my husband," Nora said. We shook. He had a choreographer's grip, firm, brief, undecorated. "We keep it professional," he said, unprompted, in the careful tone of a sentence he had practiced. "That would be a relief," I said, trying to sound like a person, not an alarm. He lifted one shoulder. "She's good," he added, "better than she thinks." "I know," I said. It came out flatter than I intended. He nodded and let us pass. In the car, we sat with our seatbelts on and nobody going anywhere. 2 blocks later, she said, "You rented the photo studio." It wasn't a question. "I saw you in the mirror last week." "I rented it twice," I confessed, "and a chair." "Why?" "Because your Thursday got longer," I said. "Because I didn't want to accuse a room of something it wasn't doing. Because I needed to see the shape of the story I was telling myself." I gripped the wheel. Because I was scared and didn't want to sound like it. We parked under the sycamore we keep promising to water. The street was the kind of quiet that listens. "Tell me the truth," I said. "I can deal with inventory. Innocence I'm less good at." She looked at her hands. "I like how he sees me," she said. "Not romantically so much as a tool I might learn to use. It's like my body speaks a language and he knows the grammar." After these months of hospitals and HR emails, it felt like the first room where I wasn't delivering news, just moving. It was such a relief I forgot to bring a chaperone. She turned to me. "I'm sorry." "Are you in love with him?" The question arrived with its own chair. "No," she said. "I liked who I was in his attention. That's more dangerous than it sounds." "Did you cross a line?" "Not with my mouth," she said. "With permission, probably." We carried the conversation upstairs and set it on the table with the mail. We didn't perform a verdict. We made toast and told the truth badly and then better. We admitted I'd retreated into silence after my mother's stroke because I believed silence was tidy. We admitted she'd taken that quiet like a dare. We admitted we'd both been waiting for the other to notice a storm that had already passed through. On Saturday morning, I did something unheroic and therefore useful. I went to the arts center in daylight and signed up for the beginner class. $40. Waiver. Shame. The woman at the desk slid the clipboard toward me without ceremony. "Welcome," she said, as if I were joining a library. The next Thursday, Nora went to the intensive and I went next door. Beginner class was a grove of strangers, most of us apologizing with our eyebrows. The teacher said drop and catch, and my body said catch and apologize. On the water break, Nora poked her head in. Surprise, then something else. Approval, she mouthed, careful. I mouthed back, always. The dumbness of it felt exact. That night we made a modest plan. Nora would step back to the earlier class for a month. She'd speak to Aris plainly about boundaries you could see from space. I'd show up sometimes, sit on the floor with a book and walk her out for dumplings. We wrote it on the calendar under the pear magnet and called it ridiculous. Ridiculous is underrated. The plan survived contact with the week. On Monday, I caught myself practicing a speech to an empty room and texted her instead. "I'm spiraling. Tell me if there's a real reason." She called me from the sidewalk outside her office and told me what she'd eaten for lunch in unnecessary detail until we were both laughing. On Wednesday, she sent me a photo of her shoes lined up by the studio door with a caption, "Witnessed." It was hokey. It worked. A week later, Aris announced he'd been offered a residency in another city. He hugged the group with disciplined theatricality. He shook my hand as if handing back a borrowed object. In the bathroom, Nora cried in quick, guilty swallows and then came out laughing at herself, like a person surprised to find out their heart still works. We didn't turn into different people. We made a better map. I practiced saying "I'm spiraling" without rerouting it through a joke about parking. She practiced saying "I want to be witnessed" without turning it into a test. On Saturdays, we sometimes sit in the lobby and watch the kids' hip-hop class end, all shoelaces and triumph. Other days, we stay home and read until the coffee goes cold and the day forgives us. Once, months later, I rented the photo studio again, this time to take reference shots for a streetscape proposal I knew the committee would maul. The mirror still faced the door. Studio B's window showed a new class, a shy guy in a band tee, two retired nurses, a woman whose ponytail telegraphed her mood. They moved like people practicing exits and entrances. None of them belonged to me. The comfort was the same as before. They didn't need to. We never turned this into a parable for our friends. We turned it into a list on the fridge. 1. Say it sooner. 2. No secret rooms. 3. Show up when the other person is learning something new. 4. Water the tree. The handwriting is hers. The underlines are mine. Sometimes at night I still think of Eris's hands on her waist and feel the embarrassment bloom, slow and hot. When it does, I get up, step out and water the sycamore. The sound of the hose is dumb and municipal and perfect. I stand there until a car passes and I remember our street is not the only street. Then I come back upstairs and slide into bed and put my palm flat on the small of her back. The body is a map, yes, but it's also a home. We are both of us trying, on Thursdays and the other days too.